Tonight's section is going to be specifically just on traits, because I'll be referring back to this guide whenever I need to talk about traits a little more in depth than what I will cover in the rest of the crafting guides, in the general or even in each individual guide. I'm not going to cover traits over and over again, so I figured I'll make this guide first so I can keep referencing back to it in my other guide. I'm going to start off by explaining what are traits. Traits are something on a weapon, such as precise, seen here, or exploration, seen on these boots, that adds sort of a passive to the item it's added on. There's no active ability that gets added, it's just always on. Traits can be found on jewelry, armor, weapons, and that's the end of the list. I'm not going to be talking about traits on jewelry today because we're focusing on crafting, and that's what this guide is really going to be all about. So I'll just let you know that jewelry can have a ton of different traits as well. There's no way for you to add traits or change traits on jewelry at this time. You can, however, always add traits to any crafted item. So the same as jewelry stands true for any dropped items you pick up. If there's a trait on an item, you cannot change it. The only way you can choose what trait goes on an item is when you're crafting it. So, let's give a quick run through of what traits are available. So all armor, it does not matter if it's light, medium, or heavy, has the same traits available. Most traits work off of a percentage, so on things such as a reinforced trait, you'll see that heavy armor actually benefits more from it. That's just because it has a larger base to stem from. The first armor trait we have, and keep in mind, even though I'm on woodworking, this can be used for heavy armor, clothing, which is light armor, or medium armor. Shields and all those three types of armor are all considered armor, and therefore all the traits are the same. The first trait we can use is sturdy. This way your item takes 22% less durability damage. The stone you need to use for sturdy is quartz. What sturdy does is pretty much, you'll notice you need to repair your armor in Elder Scrolls Online. Let's say you go into a dungeon and it's 50% damaged when you come out. Well, if you have the sturdy trait on your armor, you're going to find out that when you come out of that dungeon, it might only be 38% damaged, and your repair bills are going to be lower, and you're going to have to repair your armor less often. That is what the sturdy trait offers you. The next armor trait we have is impenetrable. It increases your resistance to critical hits by 120. What this does is it does not stop you from getting hit with critical hits. It just lowers the damage a critical hit does to you. Something to note is that this is totally useless for PvE players, as all the NPCs, monsters, and enemies in Elder Scrolls Online do not critically hit. The only time you have to use impenetrable is in the PvP areas, because other players can critically hit you. The stone you use to put the impenetrable trait on an item is a diamond. The next trait we have for armor is reinforced. This increases your armor's value by 12%. This just makes whatever piece of armor you have better. It increases your physical armor per se. You'll notice that when I was on the impenetrable trait, that this shield had 1300 armor. When I put the reinforced trait on it, it now has 1456. So it just increases how strong your armor really is. In order to put reinforced on one of your crafted items, you're going to have to find a sardonyx stone. Alright, on to our next trait, which is well-fitted. Well-fitted reduces the cost of sprinting by 6%. You'll notice in Elder Scrolls Online, whenever you're sprinting, you're going to actually use up your stamina. Eventually you'll run out and you can no longer sprint. If you put this trait on your armor, you'll notice that it eats up less stamina while you're sprinting. Therefore, you'll be able to sprint for a lot longer. The stone you need in order to put well-fitted on any of your crafted armor items is almandine, as seen here. Up next, we have the training trait. This increases your item skill line experience contribution with this item up to 42%. Something to keep in mind, this is not your experience that helps you gain a level. This doesn't help you get from level 10 to 11 faster. This, in this exact example, would help how good you are with shields. Your shield skill line will raise faster with training on it. For the actual armor types, such as light armor, medium armor, and heavy armor, it will help increase your skill line with that. So I'm currently almost maxed out on everything, but if I were to wear heavy armor with the training trait on it, I would level this up to 50 a lot faster than I would without it. The stone that you need to put the training trait on any of your armor is emerald. With the next up is infused trait. This increases your armor enchantment effect by 8%. So let's say you create a glyph and then you apply it to enchant your shield. Let's say this glyph raises your health by 100. If you have the infused trait on that shield, you will actually gain 108% health instead of what the glyph was meant for, which was 100. In order to put the infused trait on any of your armor, you will need a bloodstone. Our next trait that you can put on your crafted items is divines. This will increase your Mundus Stone effect by 3.5%. This is a really handy trait to have because it's almost like you can change what it does. Because it doesn't stick to what Mundus Stone you have when you first put the armor on. You can put a bunch of armor on with divines, go find a Mundus Stone that raises your health, and this will just make that Mundus Stone effect that much more potent. Then you could go change your Mundus Stone to something that gives you more armor. Well, it will buff up your armor because all it's doing is buffing up your Mundus Stone. If you want to add the divine trait to any of your armor, you'll need a sapphire stone. Our last armor trait that is available in Elder Scrolls Online at this time is Nirnhoned. This increases your spell resistance by 18%. So rather than directly increasing your armor, which your actual armor does, this helps increase your spell resistance. The stone you need to make a Nirnhoned armor piece is a fortified Nirncrux. These can only be obtained in Upper Craiglorn or via the survey reports that you get from crafting writs. You're not going to be finding any Nirncrux down in Oradon, that's for sure. The other types of traits that exist in Elder Scrolls Online are weapon traits. So once again, these are not active abilities that you have to press a button to use, they just act as a passive on the items you craft. The first trait for weapons we're going to be going over is the powered trait. This reduces the cooldown of weapon enchantments by 30%. So when you go and enchant an item, it doesn't actually tell you that there's a cooldown on how often that enchantment can go off. So for example, when I use my bow, it can grant me a 556 point damage shield for 5 seconds. Well, internally, that damage shield can't constantly go off. There is a small cooldown that they don't say in the tooltip. With the powered trait, you can add that to the weapon, and that way, anytime you enchant it, it reduces that cooldown, so that effect that you added with your enchantment can happen more often. In order to add the powered trait to any of your weapons, you will need Chisel Light. So for our next weapon trait, we have Charged. This increases your enchantment charges by 125%. What that means is that when you enchant one of your weapons, the enchantment will last longer before you have to actually charge it with one of your soul gems. What you'll see is on my weapon, I have an enchantment that grants a damage shield every 5 seconds. You also notice I have a blue bar that's slowly getting emptier. Once that blue bar is empty, my damage shield will not happen anymore. I will have to put a soul gem into my weapon, and that will charge it back up. My damage shield will then once again be able to be used. But if I had put the charged trait on my bow, that means that I would actually get to use the damage shield more times before I had to recharge the weapon with a soul gem. In order to craft a weapon with the charge trait, you're going to need the amethyst stone. The next weapon trait we're going to be looking at is precise. Precise increases your weapon and spell critical values by 3%. So let's say you use a staff and you currently have a spell critical of 10%. If you put precise on your staff and equip it to you, you will now have a spell critical value of 13% just from adding the precise trait. In order to add the precise trait to any of your weapons, you will need a ruby stone. On to our next weapon trait is infused. This increases your weapon enchantment effect by 8%. So when you create a glyph and then you enchant the weapon, it will just make whatever that enchantment was stronger. So let's say you created a glyph and enchanted your weapon and it made you a damage shield. If you have the infused trait, it's just going to make that damage shield larger, so it'll be worth more points. It'll take longer to get down. If your glyph by chance deals magicka damage and returns you health, with the infused trait, it will now deal more magicka damage and you will receive back more health. In order to put the infused trait on any of your weapons you craft, you need a jade stone. The next weapon trait we're going to be looking at is defending. It increases your total armor and spell resistance by 4%. Remember, like I mentioned earlier, if you improve your item, make it a fine green quality item, this 4% will raise up. So you can definitely get some good armor and spell resistance out of this. If you want to add the defending trait to any of your weapons as you craft them, you're going to need a turquoise stone. Next one is a training trait. You can add the training trait to any of your weapons. This will increase your skill line experience contribution with this item type by 84%. So it will raise your skill level with a particular weapon a lot faster than without the training trait. In order to add the training trait to any of your weapons, you're going to need carnelian. The next weapon trait we're looking at is sharpened. This increases your armor and spell penetration by 6%. What that means is that whether it be a monster or another player in PvP, it will actually help get so that some of your spells or attacks get past their armor and spell resistance better. So it's just so your attacks will, be a little bit beefed up because their armor won't matter as much. In order to put the sharpen trait on any of your weapons, you will need fire opal. Our next weapon trait we're going to be looking at is weighted. Weighted increases your weapon attack speed by 4%. That means when you swing your sword, it will be swung 4% faster. This is really helpful with slower weapons like two-handed. In order to add the weighted trait to any of the weapons you craft, you'll need citrine. For our last weapon trait, we have Nirnhoned. This increases your spell resistance and spell penetration by 10%, meaning not only are you stronger against spells, you are now hit harder with your spells against other people, because you'll get past some of their spell resistance with your increased spell penetration. In order to put Nirnhoned on any of your weapons, you're going to need Potent Nirncrux. Once again, this is only available in Upper Craiglorn, near the mines, maybe when you're out and about harvesting nodes, or when you get the survey map rewards from your crafting writs. So don't expect to find it anytime soon. Two traits that are not used in crafting but are available in the game is intricate and ornate. You cannot craft any item with either of these traits, but you definitely will be finding these items in the world. Intricate increases your inspiration gained from deconstruction of an item, in this case by 280%. Inspiration is your crafting XP, or your crafting experience. So it's really helpful to deconstruct those types of items when you're trying to level it up. Ornate makes the item sell to merchants for, in this case, 280% more. So with ornate items, you don't want to deconstruct them, you'd rather sell them to a merchant. Neither of those traits can be crafted though. You can't add those traits to any weapon or piece of armor you craft. I bet you're wondering why I'm giving you the direct percentage. The percentage of a trait can be changed. You can make every trait more potent. This depends on actually the item quality. So we went over what traits you can add to your armor, but now I'm going to talk about how you can make those traits better. You'll notice that this Nightwood shield that I actually just crafted one of, I used the sturdy trait. The item will take 22% less durability damage. As you recall, that just means I won't have to repair it as often. What you can do in order to make that trait stronger is you can improve the item. No matter what level you craft at, the sturdy trait will always give you 22% less durability damage. But if you go to improve the item, let's say to make it a fine item, you'll notice the item takes 24% less durability damage. So you're just making the trait stronger as long as you keep improving the item. If you keep improving it to blue, purple, or even legendary, the trait will always get stronger and better. It doesn't matter what level the item is, you'll start at the base percentage, but as you make an item better, the trait will get better.